Hey guys, I'm Angela and welcome back to Hobby Night. And today I wanted to talk about the most beautiful gems in my dragon hoard, aka my board game collection. We're gonna talk about the most ridiculous board games that I own. That's right. You guys have been admiring the collection for a while, and I have done a couple of videos going over my board game collection, but today I specifically wanted to focus on the games that were the biggest and most ridiculous because I really love miniatures, you guys. I don't know if you know this. It might not be obvious from the, massive collection of Games Workshop miniatures that I own, or the massive collection of miniature board games that I own, like all of the Cool Mini or Not games like Zombicide, Zombicide Black Plague, Zombicide Invader, Zombicide Green Horde, Zombicide Black Plague Wolfsburg. There's a lot of Zombicide games. There's also Massive Darkness. We've also got games like Imperial Assault, Nemesis, Folklore the Affliction. All of these games are great, massive, campaign-driven, narrative-driven, miniature-based board games, but none of them are the ones that I'm going to be talking about today because I have some even bigger games in store for you. So without further ado, I want to go over the top 5 most ridiculous board games in my collection. Now, before we get to my top 5, I wanted to talk about my honorable mention and some of the criteria that allowed these games to qualify for this video, because I recently picked up Middara. I apologize. It's so new, I have even mispronounced the name. And this game inspired me to make this video because one of the things about this game is it has ridiculous components. That's one of the key qualifiers for this. I want it to have a lot of ridiculous components, some really great miniatures, and this is a lot about art and design, and not design in the sense of the mechanics of the game, but literally the aesthetics. And so Middara, when this arrived, I was like, why is this box so heavy? It's the heaviest board game that I think I own, and I own Gloomhaven, and I'm impressed by that because that is a very heavy game. And when I opened it, I realized why. Look at the size of this book. Look how thick it is. It's huge. This is the campaign book for this game. Not only does it come of Act 1, there are expansions for this game that I do not own that come in not quite as large of a box as this, but still a really big box. My mind was blown, and I saw this and I was like, I own a lot of games actually that have a lot of ridiculous books like this, or insanely cool miniatures, or just beautiful components. And that is what inspired me to put together this video. Now, before we get into the actual list and everything, I have one other thing I want to say. I'm going to be going over a lot of the miniatures in these games, and a lot of them are narrative-driven horror games, and there could be some trigger warnings here. There's some miniatures that have a lot of small holes in them. There's some very creepy things. So if that is not your jam, you may not want to watch further into the video. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my top 5 most ridiculous board games. So let's get the obvious one out of the way. My number 5 pick is Kingdom Death Monster. And I love this game for a lot of the reasons. I put it on this list for a lot of reasons. And as you can see, it's humongous. Just look at this box. It's larger than my head. A lot of games are, but this one's massive. And one of the things that I really, really love about this one and why it made it into this list is because the design for this game on the aesthetics is just superb. This is actually one of the first games of this styling where I was like, okay, that's kind of more of an art piece than something I necessarily want to play a lot. I have to have it in my collection. This was the first game that fit that criteria, and I had to jump on it when I got the chance to grab it. And I'm so, so glad that I did. The miniatures for this game are stunning. They are so unlike anything I had seen up until having actually seen this game for the first time. And I love them. They're gothic, they're macabre, but they're also anime pinup, and I love that. I love the combination of those stylings. Now, it's not something that works for everybody. A lot of people do frown on the sort of more anime pinup stylings of this game. I personally am totally fine with it, and I really love it. Plus, the box design for this game is just beautiful. I love a good black on black design. And this game like just has that throughout the entire campaign. The book that it comes with has the black on black design. A lot of the card art does that. It's very graphic and I really dig it. And it really, really spoke to me. So I had to grab it. And there's tons of expansions. I own a very, very small amount actually of what this game could be. And one of the other really cool things about this game, other than the fact that they do obvious game expansions that come with new monsters for you to fight and everything, they also do a huge collection of models that are entirely meant to just be collector. You know, you paint this up. They're usually pin-up designs, and they're usually themed, and you can absolutely use them in the game, but you can also just collect them and have them as just these really cool art pieces that you've done up, either actually having built, which building them is a little bit of a challenge. These miniatures do not come with instructions on how to assemble them, and while there are fan-made instructions, they're not always super clear, and they're a challenge. It's resin often as well, which is also very just like, for me personally, intimidating, which is why I've actually not built or painted that many of them, just because I'm a little terrified too, because I don't want to mess them up because they are just so cool looking. And if you've ever gone and like looked at any of the models online of what people have done with them, or you've gone to Gen Con like I have, or other conventions where Kingdom Death has a booth and you've been able to like wait in the ridiculously long line that is always at that booth to see this product, the miniatures are just stunning when put together perfectly. And that's what I've seen. And I don't know if I'm at that skill level, so I haven't tackled too much of it. But if you guys want to see me maybe paint some more of these things or build some more of these things, hit that like button. And if we get to say maybe like 10,000 likes, maybe I'll pull out one of the expansions or build one of the bosses up and paint that on the channel or something. So definitely hit that like button and let me know if you want to see something like that. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this video. If you're new here and you want to see more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon for notifications. And if you've enjoyed this video specifically or hated it, let me know down in the comments and go ahead and hit the like or dislike button. But I also wanted to talk today about my Patreon, where if you want to see behind the scenes content, including photos and vlogs, as well as an opportunity to help contribute to a brand new series that will be happening on the channel sometime soon, where I am going to be building a brand new army. And my patrons are going to have an opportunity to help me choose which army, what colors to pick, and various other things to vote on. So if you're wanting to make sure to get in on that action, go ahead and check out the Patreon link down in the description below. And I believe voting for the new series will be coming up soon, possibly at the end of July. So if you're wanting to get in on the first of all of the polls and everything and really help me pick that army, make sure to go ahead and check out the Patreon. Thank you guys so much for watching. And now let's get back to the video. My number 4 pick is Tainted Grail, another sort of gothic, dark-themed Arthurian legend game, which I have played nothing of. It's actually one of my newest games that I've picked up, and I grabbed this one simply for these gorgeous miniatures that this game comes with. Also, because I really love the artwork in this one. Unlike, say, Kingdom Death, which is a lot of black and white artwork a lot of the times, very anime, this is like more painterly. It definitely has like it's very digital art in styling. I really love it. And I love the very muted, almost swampy color tones. Like this box especially, and a lot of the card art has these really great subdued greens, browns, purples, blues, really just gorgeous color tones. And despite the fact that I am a person who likes to really paint with incredibly bright colors, often like contrast paints really work super well as very bold, vivid colors, I really do love this color palette as well. And that's one of the things that drew me to this game. But it's also these miniatures. They are really cool. They're very detailed. I really think that these would be awesome, not only obviously for this game and everything, but also for any sort of like RPG setting that is in a sort of gothic fantasy, grimdark, anything that uses a lot of monsters. Like this game in particular, unlike some of the other games that we'll see in this list, there's a lot of really cool monsters. Like this seal guy is just epic to me. This is one of my favorite ones that I love. I do really like these sort of statuey looking guys with all these bones coming off them. These would work really well, I think, for like, demon replacements for 40K, which is another reason I got them, but also just like as bosses in RPGs and D&D. And so I really thought, I don't know, I just loved this game for that reason. It's one of the ones that like, I don't actually know if I'll ever play this one. It has incredibly good reviews on Board Game Geek, which I was kind of surprised with because the ambition that the designers went through for this game to create the sheer volume of narrative I was skeptical that they were going to be able to piece it together in a cohesive enough way to make people really want to like play and engage in the actual narrative. I really thought this was going to be one of those games that people just picked up as an art piece, because that's kind of why I picked it up. But then it got really astounding reviews. So maybe one day I'll get to playing it, but at minimum, I definitely want to paint up some of these miniatures because they're just super detailed and really look like they'd be fun with contrast paint actually, because they've got a lot of like textures and really interesting designs happening. I bet there were some of you who knew that this game was going to be on this list because Mansions of Madness is by far one of my all-time favorite games. It's been on a couple of other of my board game videos, as I'm sure you guys know. I own everything that there is for Mansions of Madness 2nd edition. It is a massive collection of a game. It's got big chunky miniatures, it's got great illustrated tiles, beautifully done cards, and what's great is because it is set in the Call of Cthulhu world, you can actually use these miniatures in Call of Cthulhu role-playing games, other Fantasy Flight or Cthulhu-based RPGs or board games or whatever you want to use them for, because they kind of all use the same characters over and over and over again. But one of the great things that I just love about this game is how replayable it is. Unlike, say, some of the other games that we've looked at so far, which have really big, long, sprawling narratives that you can go through that literally have like a campaign almost, because like Kingdom Death has a campaign, Tainted Grail has a campaign, some of the other games we're gonna look at do have campaigns. This one is not quite the same. It's a little bit more introductory, which is one of the reasons that I love it so much. It's cooperative, so you end up being able to play it with a group of people together collectively, and that really allows you to ease people into a gaming experience if they aren't big board gamers. And because it's got so many good, great components to play around with, no one's ever really bored. You're constantly being able to play with tactile things, but it's also app-driven, and that allows for constant new material to come out from the game designers that basically reuses the materials that you have, because if you end up with all of it, which I think is roughly 6 or so expansions, plus there is an out-of-print box that you can get that allows you to expand the game to include stuff from your 1st edition if you didn't happen to pick that up when it was out. Basically gave you the contents for that. Unfortunately, that's not available anymore, but I was able to grab one while it still was, so I have literally all of it, and I can basically go onto the app, choose a scenario that either fans have made, because I do think there's that option. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I think that is an option. But regardless, you can play any of the stuff that Fantasy Flight has come up with, and there's lots of things that have gone beyond what the initial narratives that any of these expansions or the core box included. And that is why I just keep constantly going back to it, because there's just so much new stuff to play with. And while the miniatures are not the best, they are just really fun, and I still really love them. I do want to paint some of these up at some point, just because I do actually play this game a whole lot, so I really should. Maybe that'll be a project at some point, who knows. But this is such a good game, you guys. If you haven't tried it, I would definitely recommend it. Of all the games on this is the one that you actually can I think is the most accessible. So definitely check it out if you want to. I would highly recommend it. It's my number 3 pick on this list. My number 2 pick is Hate by Cool Mini or Not, because, I mean, look at this box. It's humongous. Also, this was a piece that I ended up picking up because it was a limited run. They just sold it as a Kickstarter, which is very unusual for Cool Mini or Not, because they do tend to go through distribution and are often published by Asmodee and a couple other different companies and everything like that. So it was weird that they were doing a game that was going strictly to Kickstarter. Now, obviously, it makes kind of sense because of the name of the game, and some of the mechanics in this game are questionable, and not everybody is going to be into it, which is partially why I grabbed it, because I was like, one, I love the graphic design. The black, red, and grayscale just works super well for me. The miniatures are actually fantastic. They have these really tiny ones, and then they've got also some much larger ones, and they're all really super detailed. They crack me up actually because this game is incredibly violent, very hate-filled, hence the name, and yet almost all of the small miniatures especially are on these really brightly colored bases, and the just juxtaposition of that cracks me up because it just feels so weird, especially because a lot of the tokens and stuff are also very, very brightly colored, which is just antithesis of what I feel like this game is all about. But that's the main reason I grabbed this piece. It's huge, it's limited, and it's got some really gorgeous miniatures that are not often going to be reprinted and everything, and I had to get my hands on it. Also because, like, let's face it, this game, these minis, these could work really well in my opinion for 40K, especially some of these bigger guys. Like if this guy as like a greater demon, or not a greater demon, but like a demon prince or something like that, or even just like a chaos spawn, something like that would work really, really cool. As well as these would be horrifying in any sort of horror RPG that you were doing, especially one that had like a really nice combat system or something that could use and utilize miniatures on the board. I think they would work perfectly for that. So there's a lot of reasons of why I picked it up. Mostly though, it was just like, I mean, look at this box. Like I really wanted to have it as a talking piece because you look at it and you're like, what? What is that? Tell me about it, please. And my number one board game for this list has earned its spot for one reason. This gigantic miniature. The largest miniature in my darn collection. I mean, just look at how big he is. In fact, I'm gonna spin him back around. Here's Abaddon the Despoiler for comparison. He's tiny in comparison to this gigantic Cthulhu. So what is this miniature even for this giant game? Well, he is a level, and I think that is incredibly cool. It's one of the reasons that I put this game on the number one spot on this list, because they gave us this giant plastic monstrosity, and he's the final level for this game. You got this giant box that takes you through this great narrative campaign, going through a bunch of Cthulhu monsters and scenarios. You deal with madness, you get all of the classic Cthulhu narrative stuff, and then it ends on this giant board that is its own miniature, and that is freaking astounding to me. I absolutely love it. And one day, maybe if like the channel gets to 100,000 subscribers or something, I'll actually paint this guy because he's just massive. There's tons of other great miniatures in this board game to paint. He's an incredible sculpt. I personally love the insane number of like the little porous holes in them. I know that's like a thing for people, but I think it's incredibly like the right level of creepy. But all of the miniatures in this game are fantastic. I talked about Mansions of Madness as my number 3. This game to me feels like an upgrade to the like fidelity of Cthulhu miniatures in board gaming, and I want to see more like this because they just did some incredible things with it. Plus, the color scheme of this game, I really love this deep, rich, like forest green color. It obviously fits the Cthulhu vibe super well, but like it speaks to me so much. I have not played this one yet. This is actually on my short list of eventually, when I have a gaming table where I can leave it out and have it set up and everything and actually run through the campaign, I actually want to go through. And maybe, because that will probably be a little bit of time before that happens, maybe in the meantime, I'll actually paint some of these. But, this game is just so rad to me when I saw that it came out. And, like, this guy blew me away. Like, when they announced it, I could not get over how big this miniature was. And I don't know, barring maybe like a Titan, if there's anything that I've seen that's larger than this. Tell me in the comments if you've played with this game or if you have a bit miniature larger than this, because I'm really not sure. And that is why Cthulhu Death May Die hit my #1 spot for the most ridiculous board games that I own. And that has been my top 5 most ridiculous board games. Make sure to let me know down in the comments what your top 5 most ridiculous board games that you own are, because I would love to hear about them. I love talking about insanely just complicated, miniature-filled board games. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button. If you haven't, hit that dislike button. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications. And if you want to support us even more, you can join our Patreon and get your name listed here like all of these lovely people. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again next week for some more hobby goodness. Bye guys! And my #1 board game for this list has earned its spot for one reason, and that is